When I first saw Simon Stollenhag's artwork for the Electric State, I was captivated. His pieces bear this haunting familiarity which becomes unnerving as you take in all the details in the images. So when I first saw that Free League was crowdfunding an RPG based on the Electric State, it was a no-brainer to back. And when I was able to read it, this game left me thinking. This is my review of the Electric State RPG. Let's roll it. Before I get to the review, I'd like to thank all the folks who have liked, commented, and subscribed to DM Tales content over the years. I am most appreciative. You have no idea how much your support has helped me out and encouraged me to keep going. And I do have a special thanks to my channel members for your direct support of DM Tales. My coffee contributors help me pick up some of the equipment I need to improve the channel. It allows me to purchase new games for review and back new projects like the Electric State RPG, as well as pick up some new games for myself. Thank you so much. And if you would like to become a DM Tales coffee contributor, the link is in the description below and, well, here somewhere. Let's get to the review. As I said in the opening, the Electric State RPG is a game developed from Simon Stollenhag's artwork, found in the book, The Electric State. It is both evocative and creepy because so much of the scenes he depicts seem ordinary, and then you look deeper. The game itself is not about gaining treasure or saving the world, it's about journeying through this world and provokes players to discover how their characters are changed by it. It's pretty wild. The Electric State RPG takes place in an alternate reality 1990s where many of the cultural cornerstones from our world also exist. Grunge is a thing. Vehicles have a 90s aesthetic, and much of the technology is the same. But there's one aspect of the Electric State which takes our 90s and twists it off angle enough that everything becomes an alien landscape, because Neuronics broke the world. See, in the Electric State RPG, the human brain was not only charted, it was both mapped and then replicated. This created the opportunity for humans to connect their minds to neuroscapes. It allowed people to connect to remote drones and pilot them as though they were wearing the vehicles as skin. And it opened up the door to have new neural networks created, giving the rise of robotics that our world can only imagine. The technological leap, combined with social and economic pressures, triggered a U.S. civil war which broke the country into several different nations. The key nation in the game, Pacifica, consists of what used to be the state of California, and it claims to be a democracy, but it's dominated by Center, which is the corporation which created Neuronics in the first place. And Pacifica is in decline. While the densest population centers still feel normal, the further one travels from the big cities, the more Pacifica's decay is on display. It is a society that is on the verge of collapse, but most folks are too turned into their neurocasters to really take note or care. It's a depressing setup, to say the least, but that's not even the half of it. Ever since Center pushed out its latest update, Mode 6, neuroaddiction has been on the rise. More and more people are being found dead through either starvation or dehydration, wearing their neurocasters blissfully connected to the neuroscape and ignoring reality until their very end. Even stranger, Mode 6 seems to have coincided with the growth of what are called intercerebral intelligences. These are entities which have emerged from the neuroscapes, and there are rumors that some of them have even escaped into the physical world and created physical forms for themselves out of the drone wreckage which dots the landscape. Even more odd, cults are arising which treat these intelligences as gods. As I read the book, I tried to come up with a genre for this game because alternate history, science fiction, or post-apocalyptic didn't quite cover things, although all of those elements do exist in the game. I finally settled on describing the Electric State RPG as psychological horror. There's a lot to unpack in it. Characters in the Electric State work off of 10 archetypes, which designate their key attribute, a starting talent and money, and their basic equipment. Characters also each have a dream and a flaw. These have no mechanical impact on the game, but they do serve as an excellent skeleton from which a character's personality can develop. Characters in the game have 4 attributes: strength, agility, wits, and empathy. Starting values range from 2 to 6, and they're determined by rolling 4d6. Players roll the dice and will re-roll until every die shows a value of 2 or higher. The values on the 4 dice are then assigned to the attributes, one to each, as the player wishes. If players would rather use point buy for their attributes, they may. They're given 16 points to assign, but no value can be lower than 2 or greater than 6. There are also 2 other derived attributes, health and hope. These represent a character's physical and emotional well-being. Health is strength plus agility divided by 2, and hope is wits plus empathy divided by 2. Both results are rounded up. The last sheet value, bliss, denotes the pool of neuronics and what it has on the character. More on that in a bit. Travelers who follow their dream or roleplay their flaw are rewarded with improvement rolls after each session. For each roll granted, a player is able to choose one of their 4 attributes and roll a d6. If they roll over their current score, that attribute increases by 1. Now, these rolls aren't just succeed or fail, though. If a character fails their roll, they gain a new skill instead, so there's some improvement going on. It's an interesting way to show how characters are changing during their journey through this collapsing landscape. The Electric State uses a streamlined version of Free League's Year Zero engine. For an attempt, a player rolls a number of d6s equal to the attribute score most appropriate for that task. The number of dice rolled may be modified then by a traveler's gear, skills, or hindrances affecting them at the time. Any 6s means the character has achieved a success, and multiple successes means that the character's success is, well, extra, like succeeding while being so quiet no one hears a traveler's actions. If no 6s are rolled, or if a player wants to go for a higher level of success, they may push their roll. To do this, the player sets aside any dice showing a 1 or a 6 and then re-rolls the rest. At this point, 1s become active. Any 1s on a die rolled from a character's attributes or added through skills reduce a character's hope, pushing them further and further to the brink of having a breakdown and perhaps suffering a mental trauma. Any 1s on dice that are added through gear reduce that gear's bonus, and when a gear's bonus hits 0, it becomes busted and cannot be used until it is repaired. To keep gear dice separate from players' attribute dice or skill dice, they should probably just roll 2 different colored dice for their attempts. There are opposed rolls in the Electric State. These are a competition for the most 6s between all opponents. Whoever rolls the fewest, they lose. This streamlined version of the Year Zero engine makes setting up dice pools and reading results a bit easier on players. At the same time, it also makes pushing rolls a bit more risky, because in games like Forbidden Lands, skills never have a negative impact on the character when a roll is pushed, because, well, they're just good at those things. Not so in the Electric State. They can hurt you, and I like that added risk. Combat is set up for theater of the mind play. Ranges are abstracted and they're differentiated by zones. These can be set up by any natural separation between combatants. A hedgerow, a stream, or even a locked door or barricade can create zones in combat. There are 5 ranges in the game. Engaged is anyone who is at in-your-face distance, short is anything in the same zone, medium is anything in an adjacent zone, long is up to 4 zones away, and extreme is anything over 4 zones away. It's pretty fast. Initiative is narrative-driven. If combat happens, and this is a game where combat should be a last resort, the character who triggers the combat will go first. They will then be followed by all their allied combatants, and then the opponents. If there is a combat where the narrative says who goes first would be a toss-up, both sides roll a d6, and they add the highest wits value from their allied side. I'm a big fan of narrative-driven initiative. It just makes sense to me, and making it side-based speeds things up at the table. Now, on a turn, a combatant gets 1 move and 1 action, or 2 moves. Minor actions like ducking for cover or interacting with an object are considered free actions, and how many free actions a character gets is determined by narrative. Shouting a warning, ducking for cover, and then reloading a gun makes narrative sense, although you could probably say that reloading at that point could be pushed to a subsequent turn or take the move action. Shouting a warning, typing a computer password, reloading a gun, and then rummaging for a sandwich in a single turn, well, that's narrative absurdity. Players and GMs need to work together to keep the in-game fiction working with some sort of logic. Close combat attacks are made against anyone in engaged distance and use a character's strength attribute as base dice. Ranged attacks are made against any target in short range or greater and use a character's agility attribute as their base dice. Attacks will also add skill and weapon bonus dice to an attack roll, just like any other attempt in the game. Each weapon in the game has a set amount of damage inflicted through a hit, and then each 6 beyond the first rolled in an attack inflicts an additional point of damage against the target. The desire to deliver a heavy blow is a wonderful way to entice players to push rolls and take that risk. Now, when attacks hit, the electric state includes a few ways to make an active defense. When struck by a close attack, the character may decide to fight back. This turns an attack into an opposed roll, giving the target a chance to avoid taking damage or even hitting their attacker back. But any character who takes this reaction forfeits their next turn, both movement and action. If a character had already acted in the current round, they then forfeit their turn in the subsequent round instead. Characters targeted by ranged attacks may seek cover, which reduces the number of dice rolled against them, or they may attempt to dodge the incoming attack. Similar to fighting back, when a character dodges, they forfeit their next turn, either the current or in the subsequent round. Armor can also be used to mitigate damage. Each armor type has an armor level, which indicates how many dice should be rolled against damage. Any 6s made on the armor roll reduce incoming damage by 1 point. Damage from attacks reduces a character's health. When their health score reaches 0, the character is incapacitated and must make death rolls. To make this roll, a player rolls 4 dice and notes the number of 6s rolled. A player gets 3 death rolls to try and get 3 6s. If they do, the character stabilizes. If not, that character is dead. An incapacitated character, though, may be rallied. Any player attempting to rally a downed traveler rolls empathy. On a successful roll, the incapacitated character rejoins the fight with health equal to the number of 6s rolled. But they are not stabilized. Rallied characters still need to make death saves and can perish even while continuing to fight. I love a good rallying mechanic in games, and this one sounds terrific. The most fascinating aspect of the game for me is the ability to enter the Neuroscape to search for information, interact with attached entities, or hack the system. In the Electric State RPG, Neuroscapes are powered by massive towers which dominate the landscape. Many are connected to a global network, much like our internet, while some are limited to local access only. Accessing a Neuroscape requires the use of a Neurocaster, and each character is equipped with one at the start of play. Now, not all Neurocasters are created equal, though. The different models have different gear bonuses for processor, network, and graphics, which are applied for the different tasks inside a Neuroscape. While Neurocasters can connect wirelessly, they are more effective when they're connected via hardwire, and they get +2 dice to all attempts inside the virtual world when they are done so. Finding information in or hacking the network are each given a difficulty rating of 1 to 3, commensurate with the attempt's difficulty. This rating indicates the number of successful wits rolls the player needs to make in order to achieve their goal, though there are certain talents which increase the number of dice for neurocasting attempts. Each attempt takes 1 stretch of time, that's about 5 to 15 minutes, although any attempt that fails will cause subsequent rolls to extend to a shift of time, which is about 5 to 10 hours. Combat inside a Neuroscape is also possible, and it will be flavored like whatever world is being emulated inside that Neuroscape. But because the physics of a Neuroscape are virtual, all combat is treated like close combat, no matter what type of attack you're making. And you use wits instead of strength. Just as in the real world, an attacked entity may fight back, which may cause an attack to fail. Neuroscapes and Neurocasting sound really cool, but there's a twist. Because accessing the Neuroscape is not without risks. When connected to a Neuroscape, every failed roll increases a traveler's bliss by 1. Failed attempts can be pushed, just as they are in the real world, with the typical risk of losing hope while doing so. And here's the catch. Any traveler whose bliss becomes greater than their current hope is lost to the electric state and cannot will themselves to disconnect from the network, although they still may be able to take actions inside the virtual world, which will aid the group. Stranded players can be forcibly disconnected, but this will result in their hope being reduced to 0, and it will trigger a mental trauma if that rule is being used by the table. The risk versus reward aspect of Neuronics is one of the most fascinating aspects of play for me. Great things can be accomplished, and players may have both skills and equipment which will entice them to attempt such tasks. Sometimes even such tasks are going to be necessary. But in the end, the neuroscape may become a trap from which the players cannot escape. It's pretty cool. The Electric State RPG is not designed for long-term campaign play. The characters aren't heroes, they're travelers, and their journey has a specific destination. A typical setup for the GM and the players is to gather and select both the destination and the route the group will take to get there before play begins. The GM will then create stops along the way, which create both tension and danger for the group as they pass through a society that is in the midst of collapse. Now, this flies in the face of more sandbox-style play, where the players can take their characters wherever they want, and the GM sets up situations in response to their actions. But at the same time, given the nature of the game, you're on a journey to a specific place, and on-rails journey does make some sort of sense. But for tables who would rather have a more free-form trip to reach their destination, they may decide to forego a planned route and choose their direction based on whatever they feel drives the group in the moment. In this case, a GM will either move stops to match the route or improvise a stop to trigger the story, with or without using the excellent tools in the core rulebook. The question is, why are the travelers on this journey in the first place? And that's up to the players. The simplest thing to do is to tie the destination and the traveler's goal to the character's dreams. Something about the destination is linked to whatever they're holding out to for hope in the Electric State's dystopian world. Travelers may also share goals if the players decide their stories are intertwined. That can make things a little bit easier on the GM. Now, travelers are also going to each have a personal threat, which will create urgency during the journey. Each of these threats will have a counter, and every time they appear, the danger the threat represents will increase until they reach a final confrontation with the traveler. As with goals, threats may be shared between travelers if the players decide that makes narrative sense. Threats in this world aren't just tied to the travelers and what they bring with them. Each stop on the journey also has its own threats and counters, compounding the dystopian feel of the world. And to set all this up, there are tools in Chapter 5 which help a GM work with the players to set up a journey and then create stops. The advice here is well done, with ample examples to spark ideas. The Electric State is a full-sized book, 8.5 by 11, clocking in at 230 pages. The cover bears one of Simon Stollenhag's pieces from the art book, which is just stunning. But the cover art isn't borderless. Instead, there's this white bevel around the image, which feels a lot like an older design language, almost like it comes from the 90s. The rear cover displays another piece of art from the Electric State, along with a blurb describing the game's core concepts. The interior cover pages show a map of the game's default location, the nation of Pacifica, and stuffed in the back is a fold-out map which is stunning. Now, it is not as large as some of the other posters included in Free League products, but it's the perfect size to be used at the table. I like it. My only knocks on the physical book are there are no book ribbons, and it's printed on glossy paper. These are things that I adore, right? But the glossy paper didn't bother me as much as it normally does because the interior layout is such high contrast. They might have come on to something here. The design language for the Electric State is minimalist and is a perfect fit for the game. Borders around callouts and tables are a thick black line, and these are taped to the page with scotch or even duct tape, as though the book was from the early days of desktop publishing and what we're reading is a preprint mock-up. The heading font is an attractive sans serif, and second-level headings are preceded by the in-game center logo, which helps them stand out. Third-level headings use the body serif font with a bold face and are indented a little bit to point them out as well. Block quotes, which I have to assume are from the original art book, I'm going to pick that book up soon, are strewn throughout the Electric State RPG. These are separated from the rest of the text with large quotation mark above and a thick black line below and are presented in an italicized sans serif font. It's all very nice looking. Lists actually use a lightweight center logo for their bullet points, which is a stunning design choice. Tables utilize a lightweight sans serif font for the body cells and a bold sans serif font for heading cells. Table rows are separated by a thin line. It's all very clean and simple. Chapter title pages display a full spread image from Simon Stollenhag's artwork. The chapter title is on one of the page's spreads in a large sans serif font, and a black quote below it lays out the feeling for what is to come in the chapter. Everything in the layout is stark and yet easy on the eyes. I never tired reading it. Now, the Electric State RPG's core rulebook, as I've already alluded to, is filled with Simon Stollenhag's art, to the point where finding a spread without a piece of art on it feels unusual. It is a visual feast, and the artwork never loses its haunting and provocative power. It is amazing. I cannot say enough good things about the artwork, and now I want to purchase his actual art books so I can experience it more. This is a game which has me drooling to run it. Its almost normal world, tweaked to the point where even the familiar feels alien, draws me in. It's a game which guides players to learn something about the nature of journey and hope in the midst of a slow-moving crisis. It can be used to tell amazing stories, but it can also help players experience some deep introspection as well, just like Simon Stollenhag's artwork. Now, you can pick up The Electric State from Free League's website. A hardback book, which includes a PDF with purchase, costs about $51.35. The PDF alone can be purchased through DriveThruRPG for $24.99. Now, I don't often suggest anything beyond, if you like this sort of thing, maybe check this one out. For the Electric State RPG, I will say that if you found any part of this review appealing in the smallest way, go get this book. This game is wild. All right, I can now get started on my Path of Glory review for Dragonbane, and after that, jumping into Munchkin Shadowrun and perhaps break out the Monty Python History Reenactment game for a spin. The queue is long, but the games are amazing. Until we see each other again, folks, happy playing, everyone.